Well, welcome to this episode of Unfair Advantage, where we explore strategies, insights, and methodologies to give you an unfair advantage. I'm Mona Hilton, CEO of Advantage Anywhere, and we're proud to bring you topics and guests that I believe will stretch your mind and grow your business. Now, if you've missed any of the amazing previous episodes of Unfair Advantage, or maybe you just want to binge watch on topics that will improve your business and your life, check out Unfair Advantage recordings at www.advantageanywhere.com/videos. And be sure to get on the notification list of upcoming episodes by emailing info@advantageanywhere.com. Now, as you know, one of my greatest joys is introducing you to brilliant thought leaders that you might otherwise not have the opportunity to get to know. And today's guest, Sue Hillstad, is no exception to that. I always say success leaves clues, and that's never been more true than in studying the data. Now, Sue Hillstad is going to be someone that you're going to love. She is a brilliant data analyst with acumen. But one of the things that makes Sue different from anyone else is her ability to bring data to life by telling stories and explaining how that works. So this is going to be exciting, not like any other data analytics podcast you've ever heard before. So Sue, welcome to today's Unfair Advantage. I'm so honored you're with us today.
Thank you, Mona. Happy to be here.
I can't wait. I know that we have gone through and talked about some of the data we're going to discuss today, and I can't wait to hear it. And I'm sure our audience is going to love this and want to refer back to this many times. So welcome again. So excited that you're here. Let's dive directly in, if that sounds good to you.
Sure, that sounds great.
So how did you come up with the story behind your sales metrics or your sales KPIs? Where does that come from?
Sure. The key performance indicators, or KPIs, really have the ability to tell a story if you dig a little deeper or below the surface. And just in my past, I've always been very interested in data. Sales and marketing is really a function where we used to really go by our gut feeling. Like, you'd meet with a site and you'd go, hey, is the phone ringing? How's it going? Do you think you're getting enough qualified leads? We had these feelings that would be shared with me when I'd have meetings with sites. So my goals became to look at, well, is it rooted in data? So let's take what you're feeling and see if we can quantify that to see if the feeling's accurate. Like, we have now with CRMs and different data dashboards, we have great ways to track data. So it's like, does the data validate the feeling? Because you want to see if that's accurate. And through that process of doing that, I identified some key data points that I like to look at besides just the standard sales metrics that help to tell the story behind your KPIs.
Awesome. Now, by the way, when you hear Sue refer to the term site, you could also interpret that or translate that to mean location, community. Yes. So when she's saying site, she's talking about the actual location, just so you're aware. And I appreciate you mentioning the standard sales metrics, Sue. What are they? What do those look like?
Sure. Well, as an industry, standard sales metrics or key performance indicators, we're usually looking at some variation of inquiry to tour, tour to move in, inquiry to move in. Different CRMs, different companies, they may calculate these metrics slightly different. So it's hard to tell you what you should be referring to when I state standard. But in the past, we'd use those metrics to really gauge sales effectiveness. And what I found is there are so many other things that can be impacted with the sales metrics other than sales effectiveness. So in the past, we used to be to one of our sales team members, we'd say, you have to increase your inquiry to tour. Different CRMs or companies may calculate these metrics in a slightly different way. So it's hard to tell you exactly what your sales metrics should be. But we often use these metrics then to set goals for our sales team. But the truth is, these metrics don't just measure sales effectiveness, they measure more than that. And looking at some additional data alongside the sales metrics can help you diagnose what exactly is going on at your site and can help you to start to tell that story.
So what besides sales effectiveness can you learn by digging in?
Sure. You can learn a lot of different things. So one that I see a lot of is marketing effectiveness. Did you have a really effective marketing campaign that drove a high quantity of inquiries or new prospects? Then your inquiry to tour metric might be a little bit lower, especially if you might not have attracted quite the right persona you were looking for that. The other thing is your referral relationship effectiveness. If you have someone that's sending you, they sent you maybe 20 prospects in 6 months and you weren't able to take any of them, maybe you haven't developed that referral relationship to the level where they really understand your product and what you're offering. They may be sending you some leads that aren't necessarily qualified. Yeah, that happens. I mean, you see it happen. The other thing is CRM user adoption. We all know that the sales staff at sites are busy people. And so sometimes that CRM, that user adoption, what you've set to be tracked, if that information's not in there, if you're not putting in all of your leads, you're going to have really high inquiry to tour ratio or tour to move in. So you can start to tell a little bit about CRM user adoption too, just by looking at those metrics, if they appear too high. Immediate availability or being full with a wait list have a huge impact on those sales metrics, because if somebody's calling you for memory care and they have an immediate need and you're full, they're probably not going to come and tour your community. So if you are full, if you have a housing option that's full, your ratios might be lower. If you have immediate availability, those metrics might be a little higher if you're attracting a lot of highly qualified prospects. So once you know your metrics, like once you know your average, you can work backwards and do predictive modeling, which would actually tell you how many leads you need with how you're effective with sales today to be able to predict out, okay, we want to average 3 move-ins a month or 4 move-ins a month. That's a level we're not going to quite get to today on this episode, Mona. But if you don't start peeling that onion to see what is actually happening, really what your efforts end up being is you're just throwing darts at a dartboard to see what's right. You're not solving what's happening. So, and you're not knowing what that sales or marketing plan should be. So that's why it's really important to look beyond just the sales effectiveness aspect of those KPIs.
Well, and it would seem obvious, but you can't measure what you don't track. So if you're not tracking the data, all of this stuff, Sue, would not be available to you or people like you in order to analyze it. So if you're using, I have to say, if you're using a CRM and your people aren't using it and they're not tracking the data, then you're looking at garbage in, garbage out, and you won't be able to get into this depth. And I appreciate the fact that you said that there is so much to this. We probably should look into or talk about possibly having another more in-depth dive down the road, because this is really good stuff and great insights that you've got to look at. But what would you say is the best way to start digging into your KPIs? How do you do that?
Sure. And let me just back up a second with what you said with the garbage in, garbage out in the CRM. If you are in that situation and you don't have standards about who you want to have entered into the CRM, I would tell you the best metric to track is your tour to move in, because most of your sales team members are going to put in somebody that they've toured. So if you are not sure and you want to know where to start looking at your tour to move in. That's going to tell you that sales effectiveness from tour to the move in, not the inquiry to tour. But that's going to be a pretty accurate number. If you're questioning that, the inquiry to tour and the inquiry to move in can be a little more volatile depending on what people are entering. But when we go, what's the best way to even start? I like to start really high. I really like to go high up in the data and look at the big picture and narrow down from there and dig deeper, depending on what you're seeing and where the data leads you. It's kind of like solving a puzzle or peeling that onion that we talked about, layer after layer. There has been a lot of emphasis on dashboards lately, and don't get me wrong, I love a good dashboard. And they've been replacing Excel spreadsheets, which, don't get me wrong, I love those too. But often we'd highlight those in red, green, or yellow. And it would be for one specific moment in time, often monthly or weekly. And then this leads you to just focus on the thing that's not green, right? And if we don't know what is causing that to not be green, then we have a problem. So I like to look at trending data, and I like to start really high and look at trending data instead of just that static data point that may be in a dashboard. So for standard sales metrics, inquiry to tour, tour to move in, inquiry to move in, I like to look at those quarterly, 6 months, or a year. You can do that rolling quarter, 6 months or year, and then look at that trending year over year. So the first thing I do is I start looking at annual data. And I see Mona pulled up the visual here for volume of inquiries and then the sales ratios year over year. So you see this for the last 3 years. And the first thing I noticed when looking at this was how sharply the inquiries increased in 2021. Now, I wasn't really surprised by that because we are just coming out of 2 years like nothing we've experienced before, right? Our phones went pretty quiet for a while. So, is that the story would be the first thing. And so 2021, was that just it? We just kind of went back up to what we had? Well, what I did is I looked back to 2018, 2017, 2016. No, we didn't have that many inquiries then. We averaged maybe 120 inquiries at that site. So inquiries were up about 24% from the pre-pandemic inquiry volume. So sometimes you need to just dig a little deeper to double check. And we're kind of living in those times right now because we're starting to inch back to quote unquote normal. So then the question that came to my mind is, what have we been doing for marketing efforts? And for this scenario, a digital marketing campaign was started in early 2021. So it could be that the marketing efforts have been effective because they have the highest volume of leads that they've had even pre-pandemic.
I love that you look at a piece of data and it causes you to dig further. And again, going back to reiterate what you said about the dashboards, if you're looking only at a moment in time, you don't have the ability to go back. And like you said, you went back into 2018 to see what was quote unquote normal at the time versus what you're looking at. So that is so important that you're able to dig in order to tell your story. Tell us a little bit about that. Where do you start digging? How do you incorporate referral sources in that, Sue?
Sure. Yeah. Well, we don't know a whole lot yet here, really, right? We just looked at this year over year trending. So, and we're just kind of in this process of developing a hypothesis is what we're doing right now, or a story that we're going to want to check out with the site, right? Because I'm looking at this and I'm just trying to figure out what are the possible stories, like what could possibly be happening here. And so since the question was about our marketing efforts, the first thing I'd look at is referral source. And I like to look at referral sources in 2 different ways. I like to look at referral sources for a period of a year and tracking the inquiries for 12 months and then the results from that. So if somebody moved in, we're going to get that. And so since the snapshots for this specific time frame, I decided to just throw in another community or site as a comparison, because it's kind of fun to look at how is one site performing versus another. And these are two very established rural communities that we're looking at. So let me just walk you through this visual a little bit. I've condensed it. When you look at this, you can look at the conversion rates, of course, where most of those leads are coming from. But I simplified it to go, what leads are coming from our company? So our satisfied residents, families, employees, maybe some sister sites that we have. And then we have, it's simplified to looking at those unpaid referral sources. And then the bucket is the other. And we know that the other are often web inquiries, advertising inquiries that do take a little bit longer to mature and actually become move-ins. So the first thing I do is scan these and look for like, what are the two highest in each column, and go like, what's going on here? So you can kind of see where your leads are coming from. And in this example, we see the site that we're looking at, they have 56 leads that we don't know their source. So we know we started a marketing effort, and it's like, ooh, is this a CRM adoption problem? Are we not asking for referral source? Because if we're missing 30%, 36% of our leads referral source, we're going to have a hard time to know the impact of those marketing efforts. So that would be something I'd want to add to the story of go, what's going on with these? Is this user adoption? What else might this be? Both sites that I looked at, it's like they both had 10 move-ins, which that's great. 10 people inquired and moved in that 12-month time period. So you can kind of see the percentage of the breakdown. And again, for a rural established community, not surprising that it's a lot of word of mouth. And that's one of the main sources. But remember these numbers, the 60-20-20 and the 80-10-10. Because the next thing we're going to do is look at that second way. So the second way that I would look at a referral source then is look at the year and look at the move-ins that happened in that year.
That's good.
So when you look at this, those numbers change a bit. They do. The thing that stuck out to me most drastically was the number of move-ins in the last 12 months. So the number of move-ins in the last 12 months for the site that we're really looking at in this scenario went up to 14. So that's telling me they gained 4 people. They had 4 people move in that didn't inquire in that year. The other site had 32. Also, look at the percent of move-ins. Those numbers shifted a bit, and you can start to see that other, or those web leads, advertising leads, they popped up. So in the site 2, that popped up 18%. That was 10%. So that's showing that those leads that take a little bit longer to develop, to move them through the sales process, they're doing a good job of getting those folks to move in. Now, site 1 moved up 9%. They were 20%, but the one site gained 4 and the other site gained 22. So that's telling me that site 2 is nurturing more leads, quite honestly.
I'm glad you mentioned nurturing leads, because that's such a critical component of your sales conversion rates. So would you mind digging into that a little bit for us, Sue,
Sure.
about nurturing?
Sure. Lead nurturing, lead management, however you're managing your prospects' leads from inquiry to move in. And so nurturing leads, that takes time. And like, are you working leads that aren't ready to move yet? Are you maybe just really chasing those people that call you that they're in the action phase? So looking in that number made me question, how are we doing at working with the prospects at this site? So if you can pull an inquiry date and a move-in date out of your CRM, you can do some quick calculations. So I pulled this for these 2 sites, and here's what's actually happening at these 2 sites from inquiry to move-in. And I like to split it into buckets of time like this instead of taking an average I mean, I see that on my dashboard all the time. Oh, your average is, 6 months or whatever your average is for move-in. Take your actual move-ins and divide up the time however you want and put them in to see what are you doing. And when you look at this chart here, you can see that difference. So you can see site 1 has an average move-in of about 6 months from inquiry to move-in. That's what that 0.52 of a year means. But most are moving within a month of inquiring. So this is telling me that site 1, they might just be chasing low-hanging fruit, meaning they're focusing on that hot lead that's ready to move in. And why I might be saying that as well is if you recall looking at the initial screen, thing that jumped out to me is they had the previous year, they had a higher number of retours. So I have retours on that initial slide. I like to look at retours because that tells me a little bit about that lead nurturing. Like, are we inviting people back in to see us? It's a really important metric to go, how many people are we able to retour? And that number had decreased. So this tells me the site might just be chasing that low-hanging fruit, meaning focusing on the hot leads that are ready to move in. And why I also think this is going back to that initial slide. The previous year, the site had a higher number of retours, which to me indicates, they're following up and nurturing those leads from tour to move in. But the tour to move in metric was still good at 35%. So it was the inquiry to tour that was off and the inquiry to move in. So there could still be some work here and follow up with prospects, but there's something else going on. And that just means we need to dig a little deeper.
That's awesome, Sue. So every time you look at the data, it looks like there's something else you want to look into.
Definitely. You need to just keep following the data and keep asking why, and then why again. Again, it's piecing together that puzzle. I need to know why the inquiry to tour ratio dropped so much. And I've looked at referral source management and I got kind of stuck there since there were so many unknown. And so something is going on with the leads, right? I know that something's going on with the leads. And when that happens, that's when I like to look at really high picture, like the lead health is what I call it, the lead health at a site. And so to do that, you pull up all of your leads that you've had for a specific period in time. So here you kind of see this lead status comparison. Again, it's a big data source, right? You're pulling everyone that inquired over a year, no matter what happened to them. And you can see I split these into buckets. So yes, somebody may have inquired 12 months ago, somebody might have inquired 2 weeks ago, but just pull that data for a year and split it into buckets. Open, meaning they've not made a decision yet. Like, we still have a chance, right? So it's still somebody that we're working. Those are leads that we're nurturing. A selected site, I use that for somebody who's on a wait list, or they've moved in, or they moved in and may have already moved out in that year timeframe. And then that last bucket are those leads that are classified as lost. And in this comparison, you can see that a high percentage of those leads were lost due to financial reasons for site 1. And this might be why some of those prospects didn't have referral sources, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're working at a site that doesn't take Medicaid and you're getting a lot of phone calls for Medicaid, that's going to impact your conversion ratios. So knowing this information can understand a little bit more of why possibly that inquiry to tour ratio might be off. Because if 43% of your prospects are lost due to financial reasons right out of the gate, your inquiry to tour and potentially your inquiry to move in might be lower because of that. What's interesting is Some companies will split out tracking sales qualified leads and marketing qualified leads. And in this example, you can see we're tracking everything. And this really is one of the main reasons why I want to track everything,
Right.
because a lot of the information that we have in our CRM can be used beyond just our sales and marketing function. It can be used for development too. And if we see, holy cow, there's a need for Medicaid here, do we do something at the site to help capture some of that? If we look at site 2, their financial reasons, they've only lost 4 people. So you can see that's kind of a big deal. And it makes sense why they might not have some of those. Like I was going to say that the salesperson wasn't tracking all the leads, but I'm sorry, if somebody's like having this conversation, you might go, oh, are you going to ask them? Oh, I'm sorry, we can't help you, but where did you hear about us? So that's a story I'd want to check out with the site. Because the sales metrics for these 2 sites are going to be very different when you're losing almost half of your leads. And if I take that number out, what's really interesting, take that number, that 40 out, and here I was just looking at assisted living. If I take those 40 out and redo the inquiry to tour ratio, it's back to 34%, which is pretty good. So that could partially be telling that story.
Sue, based on this, have we figured out the site story?
Well, yes, but we've figured out some narratives to share with them, or hypothesis to share on what we think might be happening. I think you might have picked up on it might be this or it might be that. What you don't want to do is go, I see this and it's this, because we need to paint a full picture here. So usually what I do is put this information together, have a meeting with the site, and have them add to the story. So like, this is what I'm seeing. Is that accurate? And then you can ask, is that what it feels like? Because here's a visual. If it feels like that, okay, the data is saying this and that's what your gut feeling is, that's probably accurate. And so having that opportunity to get that site's input is really important. But there's one other item that stood out to me, and we've talked about it on several of these slides, is that inquiry volume that increased and the tours decreased. And when I'd meet with that site in person, I'd ask one more thing. I'd start to dig into the amount of time that the salesperson is able to spend on sales. Because that retours being lower, that might be because this salesperson is spending time doing other things. And I'm seeing this a lot. We saw a lot of people wearing different hats during the last 2 years because they've needed to, and we didn't have the inquiries, and the sales staff at sites were doing many different things. And so I'd want to talk about that a little bit, because there's something going on. If there's more inquiries, there's less retours, the volume isn't too high for one person to handle for sales at all. So they should be able to nurture those leads. So that's where I'd kind of ask, what else are you doing? What other things are you working on? Can we clear your plate to be able to do more sales? And that's very common right now. And we need to start to peel that back and get back to normal. So then that last step after getting that feedback from the site would be, okay, we have figured out the story of what's going on. And during that meeting then is when I want to pull up and like, let's do a sales and marketing plan. Because now we're not throwing darts at a dartboard anymore. We know maybe the digital marketing campaign is not attracting the right prospect. Maybe we need to tweak that. Like, we found out a lot. Is the salesperson, so now you can put those things on an action plan, both a marketing and a plan for the sales staff. And Mona, really, this stuff is all just the tip of the iceberg. It really is. You can get so much data out of your CRM by looking even at move out reason and move out destination, and how many people do you keep at your campus if you have other levels of care. You can tell loyalty. you can get to the point where you can figure out how many external move-ins you need because you know the sales metrics, you know the inquiries, you know the transitions that happen. So you can know the number of tours or the number of touches you need for a move-in, which allows you to create some predictive modeling. It can help you figure out, do you need to add more staff to your sales team? The data in your CRM can help you to figure out if you have a product issue, right? Like if people aren't choosing one of your products. So we don't have time to get into all of those things today, but there's so many insights. And really, my goal with doing this digging is we want to diagnose what's happening. And it's usually one of four things or a combination. It's either lead generation, sales effectiveness, market conditions, or possibly a product issue.
I just love this, Sue, as I'm listening to you. First of all, everybody needs a Sue. But data analysis, a lot of people think of it as being very sterile. You look at the numbers and you make a decision solely based on the numbers. But the way Sue described this and approaches this is very human. So she's taking the numbers, she's talking to the site, she's talking to the people, because the numbers alone don't tell the whole picture, but the gut that she talked about earlier, the gut decision making, certainly doesn't tell the whole picture. Mm-hmm. But by blending them together, she's able to put together a true, accurate description of what's going on and therefore what needs to be addressed. And this is the highest use of data in my mind, is to do these kinds of things. And as you can see, it's not something that you can just snap together. It's something that takes analysis and someone who knows how to look at those numbers and interpret them into actionable information. So I really appreciate this. I think that this is kind of the big first step of an MBA in data and analytics. And so I'd love to have you come back and dive deeper into this. But we did cover a lot today. We covered a lot of things.
Yeah.
And, for our audience, if there was one takeaway that you would want them to get from today, what would you say that would be, Sue?
Well, that's a great question, Mona, because we did cover a lot. And I guess I would just say, be careful with looking at your metrics and just saying sales effectiveness. Mm-hmm. To me, I'm the relational sales leader at the organization. If somebody's not succeeding at sales, that's on me, right? So I take sales effectiveness as hopefully being one of the last things that is that's causing it. So expand on that. Like, your sales staff at your site. And so don't jump to sales effectiveness. Like, let's look at other things, and maybe it's user adoption, and maybe that's due to time. Sales effectiveness is one of the last things that I'd look on that. And we as an industry have tools to do that. That's very easy to get a mystery shop or something like that to go, oh, what's going on here? Look for those other things, because that's going to really help.
That's really good. Well, I am sure our audience loves this as much as I'm enjoying this, Sue. And I just want to thank you. This, like I said, was an MBA in data analytics, and I really appreciate your approach and just your fairness in approaching the data and your just brilliance in digging into it. And I am sure they're going to love it as well. So if you would like to reach out to Sue, connect with her. She is the director of relational sales and analytics. Now you know where the relational part comes from. And I'm always here if I can provide any value to you as well. I want to thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Unfair Advantage. And I would love to invite you to join us for future episodes. Watch your email and social media for those connections. Thanks so much, and we hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.